Smart as like that looks like a good move, or smart as like those are really good looking moves. All right.
Right before and
All right, I think class has started. Please put your electronic equipment away. Pretend like you're paying attention. Thank you. So was this Gerard thing clear for everybody? All right. Can I ask you an honest question? Do you think he's full of crap?
I think he needs more textual evidence.
Yeah. Well, this is he's kind of a shaky character anyway. And what happened was, when he was young, he got a lot of renown for work that scholarly is not really up to snuff. But so what that did is that reinforced in his head that he didn't have to work, and that he could just coast by on his incredible brilliance, which turns out to either not work, or he wasn't really all that incredibly brilliant. But he's got this interesting idea. But yeah, I mean, his reading of Shakespeare is ridiculous. But I think it's a useful thing. You like that? Does anybody know what that is? Okay, well, this is a somatosensory homunculus. Can anyone spell that? Okay. What a somatosensory homunculus is inside of your brain. There's corresponding regions for all of your body parts, and they can actually sort of map it, and it looks something like this. It's a little bit. It's remarkably a lot like a person, but it spends more time on places where you have more feelings. So the fingers are big, the lips and the tongue are big. You know, the ears are big, the body's sort of, the feet kind of, but you know, like it's really hard to read Braille with your butt. Has anyone ever tried that? But with your fingers, it's a doable thing. And it feels differently, you know, when you touch things with your lips and when you touch things with your elbow, right? I didn't put the genitals on there. You'd think they'd be bigger, but they're really not that big. I think there's some sort of difference with the way that the nerves work on them or something. I don't know. I'm no expert, but it turns out that there's two of these. There's one for the somatosensory system and one just for the motor system. But it turns out that the one thing that your brain does is it creates maps and images of yourself, and different parts of your brain make different homunculi. Would it be homunculi? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sure. Actually, you just act like it's confident and people believe you. Several homunculi, and they kind of get overlapped on each other, and you have like emotional homunculi, so you've got these different inputs. Like a mirror is an input that you take into account and make an imaginary homunculi like that, homunculus, because then I'm just talking about one, and then you sort of build those up. So like people you want to be, people you think that you're like. So if you see, you know, like one of those bald white guys looking all tough walking down the street, you know, just looking like he's in a rap video, you can tell that he's got a gap between his homunculus, his imaginary identification, and what he really is, right? Or you assume that sometimes. I mean, I don't know. He could be like a gangster killer for all I know. But that's so it doesn't necessarily have to reflect reality, right? Is everyone on board here? Okay. So what we do is to kind of figure out a way to navigate ourselves in the world. We put our little imaginary selves in our fantasy space, in a little fantasy world, and watch that little fantasy person at work. So did I hear somebody, or was that just a rustling? I've got a bad ear, so I'm like this. So and this is kind of the way. So you imagine yourself as a student, and then so it's easier to be a student. But the best way for us to put ourselves in situations that we haven't actually been through is seeing other people in those situations, right? So so you kind of mimic, and this is a thing. We actually have a set of neurons that they measure, and they're called mirror neurons, and they're fantastic because they do the same thing whether you're reaching for a cup or if you're watching somebody else reach for a cup. So you don't have to move, but the neurons do the same thing. So this is how what I'm trying to get at is fantasy is a real thing. It's really happening. And so one of my favorite neuroscientists, Antonio Damasio, calls as-if systems, and they behave the same way whether they're doing, watching, reading, or imagining. And so so we see lots of animals learn this way. Rats, for instance, will prefer the kinds of foods that they see a dominant rat eating, even if before they saw the dominant rat eating that food, that they didn't have a preference, or like so you have Cocoa Puffs and Fruit Loops, and like he initially likes Cocoa Puffs, but he sees the dominant rat eating Fruit Loops, and then after that they start going for the Fruit Loops, and so there's and this is good to do. So only if you do it for people that you perceive as dominant, right? Because if you do what they do, then hypothetically you can be in their situation. Like so if you study LeBron James's basketball habits, it's only a matter of time before you're LeBron James, right? Then this is where marketing comes in. Marketing takes advantage of this and says, oh, so if I buy LeBron James's shoes, but anyway, so this is a good thing. This is a good way to adapt. This is a good way to not just be, if you're from Arkansas. Is anybody from Arkansas? Right, Arkansas has like an astronomical 33% functional illiteracy rate, so I always make fun of them. One of my before I had this illustrious job, never mind. But so if we sobered up Gerard a little bit, and we actually said, well, like Gerard, instead of just sitting here just blindly claiming that all critics say X, when in fact no critic has ever said that, and just stomping around like the angry old man that he is. He's actually really nice. I talked to him on the phone. He was going to come speak for the anyway, but he turns out to be kind of cool. But so we've got this hypothetical scenario. So X watches the behavior of dominant Y and mimes it in his brain's as-if system. So and his desire, X's desire, is to enact the fantasy to be like dominant Y. But what happens here? If you want to be like dominant Y, you have to eliminate dominant Y, right? Once you get to a certain verisimilitude in the fantasy and reality, to acquire object A. And the reason that object A is desirable is because dominant Y desires it, right? And then so X, on the one hand, kind of worships dominant Y, but on the other hand, wants to kill dominant Y, right? Makes perfect sense, right? So the thing that, and this is the thing that Gerard means, although he never really says it, is the way that the mimetic desire works is because it's not wanting the object, it's wanting so here's the object A. Got to try and make it look mathematical. And then we've got dominant Y and X. So, there's really nothing going on here, but X wants the desire of dominant Y, wants to be in the place. So the object really doesn't have anything to do with it. The real desire is for dominant Y. So I think that's clearer. That's clearer to me, probably because I said it, but that's clearer to me than Gerard puts it. All right. So that's my that's the Gerard spiel. Let me make sure that I didn't miss anything.
So the rat doesn't actually want the Fruit Loops, he just wants to be perceived as being...
Yeah, it just wants to be Y.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is so in Gerard's, so the dominant Y in Gerard's reading was who? Yeah, ultimately Hermia, right? Because Hermia was, because he says that all four all four of the lovers are all in love with Hermia at the beginning. Wow, that's kind of an offensive sensory homunculus. And then there's just a series of displacements. So approximately, so the tool, the ultimate. All right. So who's the biggest tool in Gerard's? Yeah, because Demetrius wants to be like Lysander, who wants to be like Hermia, and at least Helena wants to just be like Hermia. So both Lysander and Helena are just trying to be like Hermia. And then so Demetrius is the bigger tool because he wants to be the person that wants to be like, right? And it's sort of, I mean, the thing that you always say about Gerard is that he's not wrong. You feel like okay. So did we have questions from the reading before we take the quiz? It's a pretty short quiz.
Number 2, what is the single dynamic process that Gerard argues animates all 3 subplots?
Mimetic desire.
I forget the question, but it's the one where Shakespeare blank human desire.
Yeah. According to Gerard. Yeah.
Number 5.
Number 5 is, what do Lysander and Demetrius attribute their sudden change of heart to? Yeah.
Number 11 was the one about like fulfilled desire and stability, and I put the stability of unfulfilled desire and the instability of fulfilled desire. Is that right?
The stability of unfulfilled desire and the instability of fulfilled desire.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is the role of the father to be a paper tiger now?
Yeah, he's famously, and he doesn't really do it in this, but like usually every 5 lines he like says something about Freud, like unlike Freud who believed that animals ate people. Yeah.
The real qualities possessed by the erotic absolute.
Anyone? None. There is no erotic absolute.
Is that the same as number 1, 2? Is it none?
Mm-hmm.
What is the ethical relevance?
Mm-hmm. I think so. I don't know. I just pull these offline, and I don't actually do any other reading. Yeah.
And then, what is the problem, or with the idea of true love? Is was it that Oberon makes it sound the same as like false love, or whatever?
Yeah.
Well, if all love is imitation through the desire principle, then there is no true love because everyone's pretending to be in love with somebody else only because they're in love with them.
Okay, that makes sense.
Does anybody believe in true love?
Define love.
Well, see, that's it. You know what I mean.
Mimetic desire.
But isn't there like something that like pierces all this and just makes it all irrelevant? It's just like. Right. I had to practice a long time to be able to remember to say somatosensory. That makes it sound a lot smarter, doesn't it? Yeah. Those. It's amazing, just those little words you can just say, and then people's brain turns off after you say it, and people just assume that you're smart. Oh yeah. All right. Tell you guys because then you won't come to class. I guess you would anyway. Kind of have to. 2 reasons Gerard gives for Demetrius' love for Hermia.
And that she treats him badly.
Yeah. I think so. What does mimetic desire do when it is thwarted?
Intensifies.
Yeah. How about when it succeeds? Yeah. Why does Lysander really abandon Hermia?
She made it difficult.
More or less. The permanent restlessness inherent in the mimetic principle.
You're never satisfied.
Yeah. It's a little loose on the theorization of that. What for Gerard is the erotic absolute? Nothing?
The idea that everyone's just following their sexual impulses.
Yeah, or nothing.
And nothing.
Yeah. And then real desire. Yeah, there's a number of if you said something plausible along the lines of there's no such thing, or it really is just mimicking somebody else's desire, there is no original desire, something like that. Okay, so let's see if we can get out of the first freaking scene today. I do want real quick, because I want to, the theme of today is, so the first day we did the royalty and the overall, so now we're going to look at the lovers, and then on Wednesday we are going to look at the fairies and the clowns. So I said to Mark Aegeus's speech, and just a couple of things. Just pull out your text and mark where you're going to need. This might show up on a test. Can I get a reader for? I'll say the and in the middle of line 26 on. I'll do it, but I'm going to make it all crazy.
I don't want to see that.
No, I'm not going to do it all crazy. I'm going to do it really boring. And my gracious Duke, this man hath bewitched the bosom of my child. Thou, Lysander, thou hast given her rhymes, and interchanged love tokens with my child. Thou hast by moonlit at her window sun, with feigning voice, verses of feigning love, and stolen the impression of her fantasy. That's nice, the impression of her fantasy. With I think it's fancy in the original text, by the way. With bracelets of thy hair, rings, nods, conceits, knacks, trifles, nosegays, sweetmeats, messengers of strong prevailment in unhardened youth. He's referring to the frontal lobes that haven't hardened yet until you're about 22. With cunning thou hast filched my daughter's heart, turned her obedience, which is due to me, to stubborn harshness. Okay, so what did we learn from that incredibly? Actually, I think that reading kind of gets at it. So we learned some. We can sort of dismiss his perspective on it and take out his value words. But what do we know about Lysander and his macking game?
Well, he's been doting on her for quite a while with all sorts of gifts and smiling and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah. So what does that tell us about him, though? Does everybody use those tactics to get women?
No. It's just loaded, and he's used to it. It's practice. It sounds like.
Yeah. So it's kind of so we know that everybody read Romeo and Juliet in high school, right? Mm-hmm. So then you heard the obligatory about how the Petrarchan cliche of the Petrarchan lover, and everybody was already bored with it, which actually isn't true, because like Romeo's a badass. He kills everybody, and he's just like, and he's such a badass about it because before he kills everybody, he says, "So remember, I loved you." So it's just so I don't really know like the amount of. I think it was kind of okay to be emo, but anywho. So but Lysander's that guy and Hermia's that girl, right? And we see that they really their imaginary fantasy land is colored heavily by literature that they've read, right? So let's look at that. And I think that would turn the page. Okay, yeah, 131. Starting on page 7 goes to page 8. Now I'm going to need either one or two people to. I've already gone. I'm losing my voice. I need two people. I need a Lysander and I need a Hermia. Hermia, give me a Lysander. Lysander.
What are we on, 130?
Yeah, right under Lysander. We'll start with Lysander's I me.
I me, for aught that I could ever read, could ever hear by tale or history, the course of true love never did run smooth, but either it was different in blood,
Oh cross, too hot to be enthralled too low.
or else misgraft in respective years,
Oh spite, too old to be engaged too young.
or else it stood upon the choice of friends.
Oh hell, to choose love by another's eyes.
Okay, pause. So, that's great. And in the movie, that if I was going to show another clip, but it was so lame, I decided not to again. They skip this exchange and they make it into this really somber, you know, like, oh, this is the course of true love, never did, blah, blah, blah. But I mean, this is goofy stuff, right? I mean, those are tone words, right? Is this solemn? No. I'm reading the question. I'm doing false Socratic inquiry here. So this the O. Remember what I told you about the O?
Signal the change of desire.
Yeah. So and flaming up here. So we're getting O's. So he's telling her what she wants to hear. And but what exactly is he telling her that gets her? What's he effectively doing? Is he saying, "Oh, tomorrow we'll get to be together," and she's like, "Oh." You can look at the text. You might be able to read it from my countenance. You need to start bringing your books or printouts or whatever. All right, so he's so first he says the course of true love never did run smooth, but there was a difference in blood. What's the difference in blood?
Changing heart.
No.
Royalty versus a family.
Right. So this is an obstacle. So so they're going in their imaginary world, and he's kind of guiding her along. He gives an obstacle of how this can never happen, and her response is, oh, she gets turned on. Oh, you can't do it. And then he really gets her going. Miss Gaft, in respect of years, we can't marry because of the year we're different ages. Oh! Our parents won't let us get married. Right? So then, can you do the next line there, Lysander?
Yeah. Or if there were a sympathy in choice, war, death, or sickness did lay siege to it, making it momentary as a sound, swift as a shadow, short as any dream, brief as the lightning in the collied night, that in a spleen unfolds both heaven and earth, and ere a man have power to say, behold, the jaws of darkness do devour it up, so quick bright things come to confusion.
Fabulous reading. So what happens in this? What happens in this little line? So if there were sympathy and choice, what happens? So what does sympathy and choice mean?
If they let us choose.
Yeah, so and this is the scenario, this is the imagined scenario of if we somehow didn't have difference in blood, different in age, or going against our parents, what happens? War, death, sickness. So that's what makes it a tragedy. So if you don't have these barriers, according to the logic of Lysander and Hermia, you don't have a love story, you have a tragedy, and because there's just no way that you can just, marry somebody and be happy together in their world. You're confused or they're confused?
They are.
Yeah. But yeah, I like that. So the existence of an obstacle means true love and comedy. So that's why they're not at all upset about this obstacle being erected between them. This is actually filling out the comedy of like this is fulfilling the desire. But no obstacle equals tragedy, which we'll see in Pyramus and Thisbe later. And then she says in her next line, do you want to read it or should I? Do you want to continue your performance? I think she did. I think you need to hold up your end of the bar.
If then true lovers have ever been crossed, it stands as an edict in destiny. Then let us teach our trial patience, because it is a customary cross, as due to love as thoughts and dreams and sighs, wishes and tears, poor fancies followers.
All right, so this is awesome. It is an edict of destiny. That if you have an edict of destiny, mind you, that if you have an obstacle placed in front of your true love, all you have to do is what? An edict of destiny. You just have to wait. You just have to make it till Act 5, right? And yeah.
It sounds like Shakespeare making a meta commentary on plays and say that.
Oh, absolutely. The only thing that you can really say that Shakespeare's plays are about are language and the theater. Absolutely, yeah. So, so that's funny, and that's also a convention of novels. Novels are always talking about novels. And then just one little note in passage. Remember the widow out and dowager that Theseus is waiting to die for his desire. He shows up again down here in Lysander's lines. So what they're doing is they're moving out of the law of the father Theseus and going off into the unlaw of the stepmother, where kind of anything goes. So that's another one of those images of moving out of law into the what was it, the green world we were calling it. Still forth from thy father's house. Yeah. Ha. All right. Goodness. Maybe you should stop doing quizzes. They're taking up too much time. I'm just kidding. I would never do that. Oh, and then I mean we've got to take a look at this, at Hermia's vows, right? So she vows on Cupid's strongest bow. So this is what she's vowing her love on, and it's Cupid. This is like, what do we know about Cupid with his bow? Right. This isn't something you want to vow on, or the simplicity of Venus's doves. This is a good solid ground to vow on. You can count on this. That fire which burned the Carthage queen. You know, this is Dido. You remember what happened to Dido?
She died.
Yeah, she her man Aeneas left her to found Rome, and she threw herself on a fire and burned. So this is another good thing to vow your She is confused. So let's go to page 42, just real quick. Haha, we're out of Act 1. But so this is when Hermia gets left by Lysander or Lysol, and Demetrius shows up. And this is another thing. Remember, when you're reading Shakespeare, if a character has no idea what's going on, their first interpretation that they give of whatever's going on is actually what their fantasy is. So, and I mean, this works. So, like if you're primed, if you're a person going around absolutely convinced that the aliens are going to invade Earth, and then there's a flash in the sky, what's the first thing you're going to think? Aliens. Right. So Hermia, when confronted with Demetrius, the first thing that she says, the first thing that she thinks is that Demetrius killed Lysander and is going to kill her too. So this is her fantasy, right? What a screwball. I mean, not to put too fine a point upon it, but yeah, so 3 to 45 on it says, yeah, we've got to kind of crank through this though. You get the point, right? So I mean, her fantasy is, I mean, there's only two interpretations that she says, because she's like, kill me, right? And which is another interesting thing. But so either your only two possible interpretations are that like that she's so heartbroken that she doesn't want to live, but as Rosalind tells Orlando in a later play, I think it's As You Like It. Men have died and worms have eaten them, but not for love. It's profound. Or, this is what she wanted all along. But we got to get to the fun one. Because who I think the fun one is. Let's go back to page 9. You can't escape that stupid first scene. Oh, Helena. So she starts off with a Can I get a Helena?
Where are we? Right here where she comes in.
Yeah, call you me fair.
Call you me fair? That fair yet unsafe. Demetrius loves you fair. Oh, happy fair. Your eyes are lodestars and your tongue sweet air. More tunable than bark to shepherd's ear. When wheat is green and hawthorn buds appear. Sickness is catching, oh, were favor so. Yours would I catch, fair Hermia, ere I go. My ear should catch your voice, my eye your eye. My tongue should catch your tongue's sweet melody. Were the world mine, Demetriusly invaded, the rest I give to you translated. Oh, teach me how you look, and with what art you sway the motion of Demetrius's heart.
Okay, so this is a excellent reading. This is your classic Gerard situation, right? I mean, she's over-identifying with dominant Y, and she's like, well, what are you doing to get the thing that I want, right? So it's pretty. So, you know, so how do we let's bracket Gerard nonsense aside a little bit, and so do we read, because this is just an ode to Hermia's beauty, right? This is like something Lysander would say to Hermia, right? So probably a good way to get her interested, I guess. I mean, she's into that. Is that how everybody read it, or did you just kind of Okay. But so is she mocking her with all of that? So I guess every head direction, but of course I might be filtering because I agree. So the rest I'd give to be you translated. What does that mean? I want to transform into you, right? Lots of translations going on here. I think that's what the footnote says, right? Yeah, transform. But there's some problems. I just want to point this out, that she attributes Demetrius's love for her to her beauty, but 27 lines later we know that she doesn't really think that Hermia is actually hotter than her, right? So then we've got this. This great advice that you want to keep being Helena, and I'll be Hermia. Okay. So I frown upon him, yet he loves me still.
Oh, that your frowns would teach my smile such skill.
I give him curses, yet he gives me love.
Oh, that my prayers could such affection move.
The more I hate, the more he follows me.
The more I love, the more he hateth me.
All right. This is good advice, right? So this is has this been anybody's experience with yeah, you've seen this in action? Why? I mean, I want to take a vote. Do people really like people that don't like them?
Depends on the person.
Maybe it depends on the person. So why do you think this is a? Because this doesn't make any sense.
The whole you want what you can.
We need validation.
We need validation. This one, and then we want what we can't have. Okay. And the thrill of the chase. You got something else?
It makes it seem better, we can't have it.
Right. So I think that we can. Like, let me write these down so I get confused. So we've got thrill of the chase. Want what we can't have. And then what was yours again?
It makes it seem better.
All right. Things seem better that we don't have. Grass is greener argument, right? So give that one. So I just got that from over there. The grass is greener. And what was the other one? Validation. These two are kind of bracketed. Okay. So validation. Want what we can't have.
There's that weird economic phenomenon of scarcity.
Uh-huh.
The less there is, the more expensive. So.
Yeah. So we'll put scarcity up there too. All right. Sometimes things work. All right, but this isn't really so we've sort of but why, prod Socrates? Why the thrill of the chase? Yeah.
Well, I think in the Brothers Karamazov, they kind of discussed an idea like this. Towards the beginning, some people get caught up with the idea, they're in love with being in love, and they like the feeling of having unrequited love because it's noble and lofty and it makes them feel like they're important or something.
Yeah. So a sort of a imaginary, sort of Lysander-esque like tragic nobility. Well, I'm going to give you the explanation from evolutionary psychology, our good friend. Love me some evolutionary psychology. So being hard to get indicates that they will be a reliable mate. So the so the thing is, so we would have these inherited dispositions to go for people that aren't easy, because then if they're not easy for us, then theoretically maybe they wouldn't be easy for somebody else, and it sucks to get left, right? Seems kind of mammals and birds learn heavily from social cues of value, scarcity, and so you see this, and we were just talking about that with in the Girard thing. So someone that's just out of reach looks like a step up, and if you can snag superior genes, if you're a reproducing animal, that's a good thing. It's worth the effort. And if the person that doesn't like you seems reliable to you, so you think that they're worth listening to, then his or her opinion that she's too good for you might register as solid information that you want to make use of in your mating decisions. Anybody like this one? I like this one. Yeah.
So the reason you like the girl who chased is because it's like an adaptation?
Yeah. Yeah. But then we've got cognitive psychology, who sort of talks to evolutionary psychology, but sort of doesn't. And they've got their theoretical frameworks are a little bit less poetic, but they're the ones that do the actual experiments that everyone else uses. So this idea is that the self-concept is compromised. So I'm thinking of myself as a desirable person, right? But Lucy doesn't like me. And I'm just like, no, man, chicks dig me, I'm the Crumbmeister. And then so Lucy's just like, Lucy's just, and she's not even really all that, like, I mean, she's I've had way better, but she's just not into me, and so my whole world is shattered. This is called any psych people out there. What's this called when this happens? When your self-image or self-concept gets compromised. Anyone? Cognitive dissonance. So cognitive dissonance is a state of agitation, and so what you want to do, if we're not mind people and we're brain people, we say what the brain wants to do is assuage the disturbing chemicals and get the anxiety under control. So the easiest thing to get that under control is to go ahead and change the reality, believe it or not, because it's easier to change reality than it is to change how you feel about things, and get the person to like you, and then your cognitive dissonance is restored to its homeostatic balance. Homeostasis is the process. Homeostatic is the state, and then so you feel better. So that's why you want, like I'm Justin Bieber, and 999,000 of the girls at the concert want me, but I only want one, and that's the one that doesn't, right? And then after that, all 100,000 like me, and I'm Justin Bieber again. And then if that doesn't work, that's when you start getting to the excuses, like, oh, Lucy, she's a lesbian, that's why she doesn't like me. Or, like, or your friends, just, dude, you're such a good person, and she just doesn't see it, And you start doing that. This is the second line of defense.
What happens when they all fail?
Well, we're going to hold that thought to when we start.
Grow as a person?
No, to when we get back to Alina. Bracket that thought for when we get back to that. And then we've got the psychoanalytic. If you want some crazy stuff, this is the way to go. So in this one, this is the what we can't have theory, is that she knows that to get the object of desire is to kill desire, and what she really wants is to desire. This is the thing that feels good. So you purposefully / unconsciously only choose objects that you cannot attain because you're addicted to the pursuit. Now, it turns out, and this is really recent, this is like the last 10 years discovery. It turns out that the old reward system, homeostasis model, dopamine, right? So dopamine rewards the chase. It actually, the reward level goes down once you get the object. So if you've ever felt that way, and you're just like, I just really wanted that cake, and then all of a sudden I got it and it wasn't as good anymore, that's actually happening in your brain. It's dopamine. This is a real thing. It explains my life. I'm really happy. So it's not that, and then so you've got a different system, which is the opioids that release when you get the object of desire. So it sort of depends on how your brain's wired, if you're more of a get person or a chase person, because some people are really into the dopamine and some people are really into the, am I saying opioids right? It doesn't sound right. Endogenous opioids. And they're the things that fill opium is a synthesized form of. So everybody knows that the honeymoon ends, right? So we all know this, right? Does anyone think that maybe their honeymoon's not going to end?
Well, not that my honeymoon won't, because I don't know, but let's be real. But my parents are actually like disgustingly in love. Like
it happens.
It's gross.
Yeah, so they've got that. So they've done the thing with I told you one of the first days of class that they can look at your brain, and your brain actually functions like you're on methamphetamines when you're in love. And typically it lasts between 6 and 36 months. And really, your rational system is shutting down. This is why your friend that's in love is such an idiot, right? But some people, and I mean, when we figure this out, right? Some people they've been married 40 years, and the same thing happens to your parents are just high.
It's been a ride.
But back to the. I mean, that's probably the thing, right? Is probably they do things that make things interesting, but we don't. You guys went there. I was just talking about just going on picnics and stuff. But so this is it. And we go back to the evolutionary framework. So evolutionary psychologists would predict that in order for your maximal reproduction capability, that you should stay together for about 4 years to get the kid up and running, and then particularly if you're a man, then you should try and trade up, right? And sure enough, when do most divorce happens? 4 years. Yeah. Okay. So and then so both men and women have their trade up tactics. Typically. This doesn't mean always, but typically men try to they have an addition philosophy to getting more mates. So I've got Susie, but I'd also like Lucy. And then typically, not always, women so I mean when one of the curious phenomena of life is that men who have affairs are not necessarily any less unhappy in their marriage than that don't. This is not the case for women. Women have affairs when they're unhappy in their marriage. So they're trying to replace, and men are just trying to network. and again, I mean, there's plenty of contradictions to that. But to keep the flame alive, this is what we want to do, right? Nobody wants to just be just have a Taylor Swift relationship where you're just watching Antique Roadshow every night instead of going out and partying, right? You guys don't know about Taylor Swift? Why everybody keeps dumping her? She's just really lame, and she always wants to watch Antique Roadshow. She's nuts, dude. She's totally nuts. She's she's the new Lindsay. I'm just feeling sorry for Lindsay now. I don't even want her to crash and burn. Just So there's 3 different strategies you can. 3 strategies to keeping love alive. Okay, so the first is the Demetrius Theseus strategy, which is what? No, it's serial monogamy, right? So we've got, this is time. Yes, there's always time for free. So in the Oedipal triangle, we've got dad, mom, baby, right? So and then we talked about the tragedy of when dad intervenes and desire is created, and like what you really want is mom, specifically the breast, right? Is the object. So it's not even really mom; it's just the breast. And even though that relationship's not sexual, you code your sexual desire over your just sort of your deeper wants. So you sexualize that. But the thing is this happens before you can actually remember. So the only thing that you really know about desire is that the object's gone, but you don't really know what the object is. So you're just pursuing. You're pursuing. Every object is just a substitute object that you can never really get to. So this is why when you get something you don't want it anymore. You want something else. So we go like, Lucy's getting it bad today. Susie, notching the bedpost. Betty. Jeff, we were experimenting. Going back to Bonnie because she had the best of both worlds, and just indefinitely, right? So this is how you keep desire alive. You just keep chick hopping. Then you've got the Lysander Hermia strategy, which is to erect obstacles to keep consummation at bay.
But they didn't really erect an obstacle. I mean, she told Helena, unless she knew that Helena was going to go complain.
Why would they do that? And then what happens when they get a chance to sleep together?
She's looking.
Yeah, she's like, hey, go over there. She's not into it. I might be wrong. We'll see. I think that with the sympathy and choice thing but anyway, you can fight with me later. Or we got my girl. The Helena strategy. So, do you know who Tantalus is? He's in Tartarus. He's I forget what he did. He did something. Oh, he ate the food of the gods, and his punishment is he's in Tartarus, sitting in a pool, really thirsty, and every time he tries to drink, the pool drops, and then he's really hungry and there's all this fruit, but it's just out of reach. So for most people, this is hell, but for Helena, this is heaven. I mean, this is just laying on the dopamine thing, right? So instead of this get the object thing, you've got the object of desire, and what you want to do is circle it kind of in an elliptical fashion. So you never get there, but half the time you're getting there. So what this does, this is what we call in psychoanalysis movement from desire to the drive. Now, the drive never gets its object. It has an object. It never gets its object. But unlike desire, which can never be satisfied because it goes against the definition. Like to desire something is to want it, and to have something is to not want it. The drive is always satisfied. As long as it can keep swirling around its object, it's always happy. So it doesn't want to hit the object. It's kind of related to this, but kind of not. And we can see that it's so like the difference is like so say you're really into hamburgers, all right, and you're really hungry, and you eat a hamburger and you bite into the hamburger. So on the one hand, you're getting your nutrients, right? So this is desire, right? You're getting your nutrients, but on the other hand, man, it tastes good because you could also eat a carrot, but you don't get the same pleasure from a carrot and from a hamburger, right? So it's just the taste. As long as it's in your mouth, it's delicious, and that's sort of like the drive. Sometimes I'm just like, wow, I'm not going to even watch this podcast. So this is where we get to Helena's special way of dealing with things, right? So her problem is if I'm right, which I am, she has to make the situation so she can stay close to Demetrius. But never get him, right? And so you get to like what does she do when I'm going to go ahead and say that I've read enough Shakespeare that if Helena took Hermia's advice and shunned him, it would work, right? So why doesn't she? Is she an idiot? She doesn't seem like an idiot. Let's look at her plan on page 11. So start at 241.
So the boy love is perjured everywhere, for ere Demetrius looked on Hermia's eye, he hailed down oaths that he was only mine. And when this hail some heat from Hermia felt, so he dissolved, as showers of oaths did melt. I will go tell him of fair Hermia's flight, then to the wood will we tomorrow night pursue her for this intelligence. If I have fangs, it is a dear expense, but herein I to enrich my pain, have the sight thither and back again.
Okay, so especially those last two lines, right? So her explicit goal is to enrich her pain.
Sounds helpful.
To have the sight hither and back again, right? So she's going out. She knows this is. This is the worst thing, right? So if she's not, pathological, the last thing that she wants to do is get, because she knows that telling Demetrius will get him all hot and bothered for Hermia and chasing Hermia, right? And she knows this. She's talking about how it's going to happen, and then so she's just going to go out and just this is. Right. I mean, no offense to you cutters out there, but this is the exact same thing. And I mean, and she totally knows she knows her motivations. She goes with it. And another thing is I don't want to dwell on this because I'm not really into this. But any mention of her dad anywhere? Daddy issues. As the absent father. All right. Figure out why. It's too bad that we can't. We should just do this every semester and go through all of Shakespeare's plays so you can see the other Helena, who's even weirder than this one. All right, and then so let's go to 24 real quick for more quote textual evidence unquote. So Demetrius being quite candid around line 200 here, around 199 rather. Are you cool still doing? Okay. Then I'm going to see Heather. All right, Demetrius.
Do I entice you? Do I speak you fair? Or rather, do I not in plainest truth tell you I do not nor cannot love you?
And even for that do I love you the more. I am your spaniel, and Demetrius, the more you beat me, I will fawn on you. Use me, but as your spaniel, spurn me, strike me, neglect me, lose me, only give me leave, unworthy as I am to follow you. What worse a place can I beg in your love, and yet a place of high respect with me, than to be used as you use your dog?
That's perfect. That's she's a treasure. Now, has anyone ever experienced this kind of conversation? Some of us have. I didn't say which side. So a spaniel. So you can picture this kind of dog that she's talking about, right? And these are those freaking underfoot dogs that are just whining. You just watch. Like, man, I did not mean to kick you, but man, I just want to kick you so bad. And I love dogs. But it's just I call it passive depression. This is my contribution to psychology. Like passive aggressive. There's like different ways of being depressed. There's like heroic depression, and it's just like I just want to die. you get this nobility about you. And then there's just, like complete train wreck depression. You can see these people are just kind of walking around in a daze. And, so, and they kind of have a halo about them, and you want to help them. You open the door for them and stuff. And then there's these mopey MFers, right? They're sort of, no, I'm fine. Can I get some water? But this is passive depression. So if embrace your depression, and then people will like you, or at least open doors for you. But so when he says, like point blank, this is just, dude, I'm just not into you, and even for that, I do love you the more. She's totally serious, right? So what her strategy here is, she's making it very, very clear. She's not an idiot. She knows that. Knows unconsciously knows that this is not how you seduce people. This is not it. Has anyone ever been successfully seduced by the "I want to be your dog" strategy? There's a great Jens Lekman song. He says that when I said I wanted to be your dog, I wasn't coming on to you. I just wanted to lick your face. It's a good song. He's funny. But anywho, under normal circumstance, I would like to see. I want to do a worldwide survey of the "I want to be your dog" seduction tactic if it's ever worked, because it really just right. We don't. That does not activate the evolutionary. She's going to be tried and true cue. Like that's the opposite. Or she's going to be too true, which is even worse. All right. And then I keep thinking about that Jens Lekman song. So let's go to page 31 now. All right, so this is when Lysander tries his famous Hermia Mac, and he starts talking about love stories written in love's richest books, and this is not what Helena wants to hear, right? So we talked about. I said earlier, I made the claim, and this goes for every play that we read. If someone wants to make a counterclaim to this, when someone is presented with a situation in which they do not know what's going on, what did I say they do? Yeah, they interpret it as their fantasy coming true. So let's. Do you want to keep going? You've been a fabulous one. All right, you got a 10 for your participation for the whole semester just from today. So wherefore was I?
Wherefore was I to this keen mockery born, when at your hands did I deserve this scorn? 'Tis not enough, young man, that I did never, no, nor never can, deserve a sweet look from Demetrius' eye, but you must flout my insufficiency. Okay, that's good. So what's her fantasy here? It's an old one. It's paranoid delusion, right? Conspiracy, right? So this is masochism often slides into this because like the thing about having everybody against you is, man, they're paying attention. They don't want to dwell too much on this movie because we're running out of time. But and this is great because this is right after, and we'll talk more about this next time. But Lysander's claimed that the fairy juice has inspired reason for him, and this is belief-based reality. That have you ever noticed that people believe things first, and then their arguments for it? They've already made their decision, but they'll argue. This is why you can never change anybody's mind by rational thinking, because they already believe what they believe, and they'll just deploy a whole battery of biases to make sure that you can't displace that. All right, 46. So this was on the test too, so I wanted you to So this is the touching scene where where the spurned heroine finally magically turns the affections of the disinterested hero that she's been pursuing all along, and he finally confesses his love to her. And who is my Demetrius?
All right, so start with the O in this last line, and then we want Helena back in the house.
O Helen, goddess, nymph, perfect divine, to what my love shall I compare thine? Crystal is muddy, oh how ripe in show, thy lips, those kissing cherries tempting grow, that pure congealed white, high Taurus snow, fanned with the eastern wind, turn to the crow. When thou holdst up thy hand, oh let me kiss this princess of pure white, this seal of bliss.
O spite, O hell, as if you were all bent to set against me for your merriment. If you were civil and you courtesy, you would not do me thus much injury.
Okay, so perfect. So again, we talked a little bit about this. This is that's a weird thing to say when you finally get your way, unless you're really into this thing, right? So this is, like getting Demetrius was just a catastrophe, right? And so what we can say a lot of things about Helena in the first half plus of the play. Like she's miserable, yeah, whatever, but she's really energetic, she's really engaged, she's really alive. After this happens, her just balloon gets popped, right? And we're not going to see her happy again. Like all she does later in the play after this is she goes to sleep and gets up and well, let's not take my word for it. Let's go to 52, I think. Yeah. No, we actually don't have time. You'll have to take my word for it. But in her speech to Hermia here, is she's just defeated, and like Hermia's got all the spunk now and stuff. Even though she's the one that's being spurned, she's the one that wants to fight. Helena tries to run away, just gets tired and just And then so she does that, and then she's got the famous hangover scene, like waking up, and she's just like just as if she just woke up from a horrible dream. She behaves exactly the same way. And I have written here, poor thing. She defeated her rival. All the boys love her, and her conspiracy theory proved false. She's miserable. Poor thing. Well, we've got the big discussion questions, but we don't have enough time, and I've got to get the old quizzes back to you. So we've got homunculi. Would it be homunculi?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sure. Actually, you just act like it's confident, and people believe you. Several homunculi, and they kind of get overlapped on each other, and you have like emotional homunculi, so you've got these different inputs, like a mirror is an input that you take into account and make an imaginary homunculi like that, homunculus, because then I'm just talking about one, and then you sort of build those up. So like people you want to be, people you think that you're like. So if you see, like one of those bald white guys looking all tough walking down the street, just looking like he's in a rap video, you can tell that he's got a gap between his homunculus, his imaginary identification, and what he really is, right? Or you assume that sometimes. I don't know. He could be like a gangster killer for all I know. But that's so it doesn't necessarily have to reflect reality, right? Is everyone on board here? Okay. So what we do is to kind of figure out a way to navigate ourselves in the world. We put our little imaginary selves in our fantasy space, in a little fantasy world, and watch that little fantasy person at work. So did I hear somebody, or was that just a rustling? I've got a bad ear, so I'm like this. So and this is kind of the way. So you imagine yourself as a student, and then so it's easier to be a student. But the best way for us to put ourselves in situations that we haven't actually been through is seeing other people in those situations, right? So so you kind of mimic, and this is a thing. We actually have a set of neurons that they measure, and they're called mirror neurons, and they're fantastic because they do the same thing whether you're reaching for a cup or if you're watching somebody else reach for a cup. So you don't have to move, but he's kind of a shaky character anyway. And what happened was when he was young, he got a lot of renown for work that that scholarly is not really up to snuff. But so what that did is that reinforced in his head that he didn't have to work and that he could just coast by on his incredible brilliance, which turns out to either not work or he wasn't really all that incredibly brilliant. But he's got this interesting idea. But yeah, I mean, his reading of Shakespeare as a reading of Shakespeare is ridiculous. But I think it's a useful thing. You like that? Does anybody know what that is? Okay, well, this is a somatosensory homunculus. Can anyone spell that? Okay. What a somatosensory homunculus is inside of your brain. There's corresponding regions for all of your body parts, and they can actually sort of map it, and it looks something like this. It's a little bit. It's remarkably a lot like a person, but it spends more time on places where you have more feelings. So the fingers are big, the lips and the tongue are big. You know, the ears are big, the body's sort of, the feet kind of, but you know, like how, like it's really hard to read Braille with your butt. Has anyone ever tried that? But with your fingers, it's a doable thing. And it feels differently, you know, when you touch things with your lips and when you touch things with your elbow, right? I didn't put the genitals on there. You'd think they'd be bigger, but they're really not that big. I think there's some sort of difference with the way that the nerves work on them or something. I don't know. I'm no expert, but it turns out that there's two of these. There's one for the somatosensory system and one just for the motor system. But it turns out that the one thing that your brain does is it creates maps and images of yourself, and different parts of your brain make different. All right, I think class has started. Please put your electronic equipment away. Pretend like you're paying attention. Thank you. So was this Gerard thing clear for everybody? All right. Can I ask you an honest question? Do you think he's full of crap?
I think he needs more textual evidence.
Yeah. Well, this is I talked to him on the phone. He was going to come speak for the anyway, but he turns out to be kind of cool. But so we've got this hypothetical scenario. So X watches the behavior of dominant Y and mimes it in his brain's as-if system. So and his desire, X's desire, is to enact the fantasy to be like dominant Y. But what happens here? If you want to be like dominant Y, you have to eliminate dominant Y, right? Once you get to a certain verisimilitude in the fantasy and reality, to acquire object A. And the reason that you know object A is desirable is because dominant Y desires it, right? And And then so X, on the one hand, kind of worships dominant Y, but on the other hand, wants to kill dominant Y, right? Makes perfect sense, right? So the thing that, and this is the thing that Girard means, although he never really says it, is the way that the mimetic desire works is because it's not wanting the object, it's wanting the, so here's the object A. Got to try and make it look mathematical. And then we've got dominant Y and X. So, there's really nothing going on here, but X wants the desire of dominant Y, wants to be in the place. So the object really doesn't have anything to do with it. The real desire is for dominant Y. So I think that's clearer. That's clearer to me, probably because I said it, but that's clearer to me than Girard puts it. All right. So that's my that's the Girard spiel. Let me make sure that I didn't miss anything.
So the rat doesn't actually want the Fruit Loops, he just wants to be perceived as being...
Yeah, it just wants to be Y.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is so in Girard's, so the dominant Y in Girard's reading was the neurons do the same thing. So this is how what I'm trying to get at is fantasy is a real thing. It's really happening. And so the one of my favorite neuroscientists, Antonio Damasio, calls as-if systems, and they behave the same way whether they're doing, watching, reading, or imagining. And so, so we see lots of animals learn this way. Rats, for instance, will prefer the kinds of foods that they see a dominant rat eating, even if before they saw the dominant rat eating that food, that they didn't have a preference, or like so you have Cocoa Puffs and Fruit Loops, and like he initially likes Cocoa Puffs, but he sees the dominant rat eating Fruit Loops, and then after that they start going for the Fruit Loops, and so there's and this is good to do. So only if you do it for people that you perceive as dominant, right? Because if you do what they do, then hypothetically you can be in their situation. Like so if you study LeBron James's basketball habits, it's only a matter of time before you're LeBron James, right? Then this is where marketing comes in. Marketing takes advantage of this and says, oh, so if I buy LeBron James's shoes, but anyway, so this is a good thing. This is a good way to adapt. This is a good way to not just be, if you're from Arkansas. Is anybody from Arkansas? Right, Arkansas has like an astronomical 33% functional illiteracy rate, so I always make fun of them. One of my before I had this illustrious job, never mind. But so if we sobered up Girard a little bit, and we actually said, well, like Girard, instead of just sitting here just blindly claiming that all critics say X, when in fact no critic has ever said that, and just stomping around like the angry old man that he is, he's actually really nice.